Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that, well, it touches almost every Australian, nearly every week, the intricate world of petrol prices. You see those numbers at the pump constantly shifting, but understand the forces behind them. It can feel like solving a really complex puzzle. Our mission for this deep dive is to take our source material and at-a-glance guide on Australian petrol pricing, and we've bolstered that with key insights from the ACCC and Australian petroleum statistics and, thoroughly unravel the fundamental factors influencing what you pay at the Bowser. We really aim to cut through the noise, offering you a clearer, more actionable understanding of this essential daily expense. Get ready to see your fuel receipt in, well, a whole new light. Let's begin right at the very start. When we pull up to fill our tanks, where does that petrol actually originate? Is it predominantly refined right here in Australia, or are we reliant on global supply chains?
Yeah, that's precisely where we need to start because Australia's position in the global energy market is, well, it's crucial to understanding our local prices. While we do have some domestic refining capacity, Australia relies heavily on imports for its refined petroleum products, primarily from various countries in Asia.
Okay, Asia mainland.
Exactly. For context, if we look back at 2015-16 figures, a substantial 31% of our petrol came from South Korea. Singapore was close behind at 25%. Japan contributed 16%, and India 9%, the remaining 19%. That was sourced from a diverse mix of other nations, places like Malaysia, Indonesia, Chinese Taipei, Thailand, and even the USA. So it's very much a globally sourced product.
So we're importing most of it, primarily from Asia. What's fascinating here is that Singapore seems to be mentioned quite a bit in the context of pricing. Is it just another supplier, or, does it hold a special significance for Australian prices?
Oh, Singapore isn't just another supplier. It's truly the pivotal trading center for the entire Asia-Pacific regional market. The unleaded petrol price in Singapore, specifically known as MOPS 95 petrol, acts as the absolute key pricing benchmark for Australian petrol.
MOPS 95.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So when you hear about international oil price movements, for us here in Australia, the MOPS 95 price is the critical number to watch. It's the regional hub where prices are set for a vast part of the world, and, well, we're directly linked to it.
That makes sense. But knowing that our prices are benchmarked to Singapore, does that mean shifts in the MOPS 95 price hit our pumps instantaneously? Or is there a kind of buffer, like a delay built into the system?
That's a crucial distinction, and it explains a lot of the lag you might notice. There definitely is a delay. According to the ACCC, changes in those Singapore benchmark prices can take around 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Roughly, yeah. 2 weeks to fully work their way through the entire supply chain and filter down to the pumps in Australian capital cities. And if you're in a regional area, that lag can actually be even longer.
Longer again, right. Why is that?
Mostly due to additional transport and logistical considerations. Takes longer to get it out there. So the price you're paying today really reflects global market conditions from maybe a couple of weeks ago, not necessarily yesterday's headlines. Understanding that lag is really key for a consumer.
Okay, so petrol arrives in Australia, but clearly the price we see at the pump isn't just the MOPS 95 price plus shipping. What exactly makes up that final price tag? When you look at those big numbers at the service station, what are the different components we're actually paying for?
It's a great question, and understanding these components truly helps demystify the price. The petrol pump price can essentially be broken down into 3 main layers, almost like a pie chart, you could say.
Yeah.
Roughly 45% of what you pay is the actual product cost. That's the refined product itself, what we call the landed cost after it reaches Australia.
45% product cost.
Then a very substantial 40% goes directly towards government tax.
40%.
Yep. And the remaining 15% covers what are known as industry operating costs.
Right. Let's stick with the product cost for a second, that 45%. What's built into that?
Sure. So this doesn't just include the Singapore petrol price, that MOPS 95 benchmark, and the shipping costs to get it here. There are also other costs embedded. These include things like a quality premium to ensure the fuel meets Australia's stringent standards.
Ah, our fuel standard.
Exactly. Plus insurance against loss during transit, and wharfage costs, essentially the fees for using port facilities when the fuel is offloaded. So it's definitely more than just the base commodity price.
Okay, got it. Now that 40% going to government tax, that's a significant chunk, almost half the price just in taxes.
It certainly is a major component. This 40% is comprised of 2 primary elements. The excise duty, which is currently set at 40 cents per liter,
40 cents.
and it's indexed twice a year to the Consumer Price Index, meaning it adjusts with inflation. On top of that, there's the standard 10% goods and services tax, or GST.
Right, the GST applies too.
It does. And what's particularly interesting when we connect this to the broader economic picture is that Australian petrol prices have historically been quite low compared to overseas. For instance, back in December 2016, Australian prices were actually the lowest among OECD nations in the Asia-Pacific market.
Really? Lowest, even with that 40% tax.
Even with the tax, yes, compared to countries like New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan.
That's fascinating. How can that be? Why would our prices be so comparatively low then? What does that suggest about the Australian market?
Well, it primarily points to incredibly tight wholesale and retail margins within Australia, really tight. The intense competition, which we'll get into a bit more later, forces fuel suppliers and retailers to operate on very lean profits per liter.
So they absorb costs to stay competitive.
Essentially, yes. They absorb a lot of potential profit to keep prices sharper than you might find in less competitive markets. This unique dynamic means that despite the substantial tax burden, the before-tax price of fuel and the margins taken by the industry are actually exceptionally low here. It reflects a very efficient and competitive market rather than, any kind of hidden subsidy or anomaly.
That sheds a lot of light on it.
Mhm.
Okay, so turning to that remaining 15% for industry operating costs, it's easy for us consumers to see that figure and jump to conclusions about massive company profits. What's the biggest misconception people have about that 15%?
Yeah, the biggest misconception is precisely that it's all profit. It's crucial to understand that this 15% covers both wholesale and retail operating costs, actual expenses.
Cost, not profit. Got it.
These are the actual expenses involved in getting the fuel from its point of arrival in Australia all the way into your car's tank. On the wholesale side, these costs include things like terminal operating expenses, the admin and marketing costs involved in wholesale distribution, and various government company taxes and charges that apply specifically to wholesaling activities.
Okay, so that's the wholesale bit.
Right. This covers the difference between, say, the Singapore petrol price plus government taxes and the national average wholesale price. That wholesale price is often referred to as the terminal gate price, or TGP.
TG, terminal gate price.
Exactly. It's essentially the price fuel suppliers pay when it leaves the major terminals before it even hits the service station network. And again, this isn't profit. It's the necessary cost of moving that fuel through the initial distribution channels.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And the retail costs?
Right. Then you have the retail costs. These are the expenses incurred by the service stations themselves. This covers their administration and local marketing costs, the substantial day-to-day costs of running a service station, things like wages for staff, rent for the land, utilities like electricity.
All the running costs.
All those things, plus additional government company taxes and charges on their retailing activities. So the difference between the national average retail price you see at the pump and that wholesale price, the TGP, covers these substantial and varied retailing costs. It's quite a complex operation, far from just pure profit.
Okay, so once the petrol arrives in Australia, it's taxed, and we've accounted for its initial operating costs. It still needs to reach your local service station. How does that physical journey unfold? It's not just magic, right?
Definitely far from it. It's a complex logistical ballet, really. Once the petrol is either produced at the limited number of Australian refineries or shipped by those giant tankers from Asia, it arrives at large import terminals. These are strategically dotted around the Australian coastline.
Big terminals first.
Yep. From these major terminals, it's often transported by pipeline to larger regional storage facilities and distribution hubs. And finally, from those larger storage points, it's loaded onto a fleet of fuel trucks. Those trucks then deliver the petrol directly to your local service stations, whether that's in a busy city or a more remote town. It's a very precisely timed and coordinated effort to ensure consistent supply.
And speaking of local, we often hear that regional petrol prices are different, usually higher than capital cities. Is that just a common perception, or is there a real, tangible reason for that difference?
Oh, it's definitely not a myth. You'll consistently find that petrol prices are higher the further the petrol must travel from those major import terminals to get to the pump.
So distance is key.
Absolutely. It's largely due to increased freight, and handling costs more distance means more fuel for the trucks, more wages for drivers, more time involved. The ACCC has confirmed that petrol prices in regional locations are generally higher and also tend to be more stable.
More stable? How so?
They don't experience the same dramatic daily fluctuations, those price cycles, that you often see in the bigger cities.
Interesting. And despite all this, you mentioned competition earlier.
Yes, what's remarkable here is that despite these variations and the logistics involved, the Australian fuel market is considered highly competitive, extremely so. This competition is so intense that the actual profit made by fuel suppliers, both wholesale and retail, is typically a very, very small share of the overall pump prices you see. This is why our margins are so tight compared to other OECD nations we talked about.
That's a key point, and that intense competition really seems to be at play with those dynamic price changes we observe, particularly in the capital cities. Is that also competition in action? A visible sign of how competitive the market is?
Absolutely. Those dynamic price changes you observe, especially in capital and larger cities, are largely due to what's known as a discounting
The
cycle.
price cycles, yeah.
Exactly. The market is incredibly transparent, partly thanks to those highly visible price boards at every service station, but also, crucially, due to a growing range of independent price comparison apps, things like Fuel Watch or Motor
Oh,
Mouth.
the apps. They make a
A
difference.
huge difference. These tools empower motorists like you to actively take advantage of discounting and easily find the best price in your local area. It essentially forces retailers to constantly adjust prices to remain competitive, creating that cycle of highs and lows we see.
So technology is driving transparency and competition there.
Definitely playing a big role. And it's also important to note, while you see major oil company brand names on most service stations like Shell or BP or Caltex, many of these specific businesses are actually owned and/or operated by supermarkets and independent operators.
Oh, right. Not always the big oil company running the site itself.
Often not. It's these individual operators who generally have the autonomy to set the prices at those specific sites. That adds another layer to the competitive landscape. This decentralized pricing power is why retailing costs and pump prices can vary so much, even between nearby towns. It reflects differences in local competition, population density, those freight and handling costs we mentioned, and also different operating conditions based on the volumes of fuel sold and even the turnover from their convenience stores. Each site truly has its own microeconomy, you could say.
Wow, okay. So now that we've peeled back the layers of this pretty complex system, what does all this mean for you, the person at the pump? How can this knowledge actually help us make more informed decisions?
Well, I think it's about empowerment through understanding, really. Moving from just passively observing the price to actively engaging with why it is what it is. As a consumer, when you notice the price of petrol rise or fall, you can now attribute it to one of two primary factors. It's either changes in those international petrol prices, specifically the MOPS 95 benchmark from Singapore.
The global factor.
Right. Or it's due to the intense competition and discounting happening between service stations right there in your local area.
The local factor.
Exactly. And knowing about that 2-week lag we discussed earlier is powerful too. If you see international oil prices plummeting today, you know there's a window, potentially, to wait for that drop to filter down to your local pump rather than feeling rushed.
Or the opposite, if prices spike internationally.
Precisely. If there's a global surge, it might be wise to fill up sooner rather than later before it hits the Bowser price. This knowledge transforms what feels like a daily chore into a more informed decision.
Exactly. Understanding this relationship between global market prices, government taxes, and that fierce local competition is absolutely crucial. It helps you make smarter decisions, like, as you said, utilizing those price comparison apps to find the best deal, rather than feeling like you're just at the mercy of some unseen force. It's about seeing the fundamental economics at play in a very tangible, everyday way. What an incredible journey we've taken today, really, from the refineries in Asia to the intricate logistics that bring fuel to your local service station. It's clear that from global supply chains and international benchmarks to significant taxes and fierce local competition, a myriad of factors converge to determine the price of petrol. It's far more intricate than just looking at a number on a sign. It's a whole global economic story playing out at your local Bowser.
It really is. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how many layers of economic activity, policy, and market dynamics are embedded in such a routine daily purchase. It's a perfect example of how complex global and local markets impact our everyday lives, often without us even realizing the full picture.
Indeed. So next time you're filling up, maybe consider not just the price, but the entire complex ecosystem that brings that fuel to your tank. And it raises an important question, doesn't it? What other everyday necessities do we consume that have such an intricate, hidden pricing structure just waiting to be unpacked? That's all for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us.